Hello, welcome to Finding the Frame. I'm your host, Xander Miller, where we practice, this is the show where we practice discernment through dialogos. And today I have a new guest, Andrew Algra, who actually I met through Matt, who was the guest from the previous show. So Andrew, why don't you tell us a few things about yourself?
Yeah, my name's Andrew. I'm a small business owner, husband, father of three little girls, and I'm fairly obsessed with the Bible and with meaning and truth and the nature of reality. So, have a lot of overlap with you, I think, as far as our interests go, and looking forward to this conversation very much.
Yeah, me too. And I mean, another connection is we both went to the Conscience and Consciousness conference in Thunder Bay.
Yeah,
Yeah. And we
bit
both
of a
found it,
mouthful.
and we both found it like a profound experience that was in some ways life-changing, I think.
Yeah. For sure. I think it's interesting to have watched you because we didn't meet at the conference, but
Mhm.
we seem to be on a very similar trajectory where we came in excited and hopeful. And for myself, I really found a catalyst there to push me into the next stage of my personal project, and especially with content creation. So to see you have that experience and to
Mhm.
be pressing into conversations and putting up these videos has been inspirational. And I feel like kind of like a kindred spirit there
Yeah,
with you.
I think,
As
yeah, quite possibly. I mean, it's definitely like, I would say it's been a catalyst for me of a next stage as well. But I mean, it's difficult as a Christian sometimes because, you say like God has a plan for you, right? And then, but if you just say, well, I think I'm following God's plan for me, it sounds very presumptuous at the same time. But I felt like going into the beginning of the summer, I had sort of reached sort of the end of my the last sort of leg of my journey, and I was sort of in this holding pattern. And
Mhm.
it's when I was praying, and then that sort of in that sort of holding pattern state where I wasn't sure what I was going to do next, that my friend introduced this idea of going to the conference to me.
A good
And
friend.
yeah, he actually didn't do it for me. He was lamenting that since he's actually escaped to Florida, he couldn't go to the
Okay.
conference. But I was looking at it, I was like, but I could go.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So,
Yeah.
but very much so. And it was sort of in that sense, it was like I was praying, and I sort of would come up, the idea of the conference would come up in my prayers, is sort of like, this is the next thing you got to do. And I did, and it really did feel like that was that catalyst where um it gave me the framework where I could start reaching out, right?
Mhm.
Like I'd made these changes in my life, but I really didn't have the language or the structure to express it to other people. And I think you sort of voiced the same concern in your videos, that you developed these personal practices, but you had trouble expressing the value of them to other people. Is that like a fair?
Yeah, that's something that I was going through in my 20s for sure. But as far as the conference, like I went in with a model that I had in mind because I'd been looking at the work of Jonathan Pajot and John Vervaeke for a
Mhm.
couple of years already, and trying to fit them, because I'm not orthodox and I'm not a non-theist like John
Yeah.
is either, right? But that both of their perspectives were really informing mine, and I found informing my interpretation of scripture and my faith. So I was looking for a way to put those things together, because if they're both true, the truth confirms the truth. And so they should be coherent with one another. And so I had developed this model and I brought it with me to the conference, and I got the chance to share it with people there, and with Jonathan and with John. And I think I had a similar experience to you with Vervaeke, where maybe it's like what you had with Peugeot,
Hmm.
where you got this insight from him that helped you to
Yeah.
bring it forward. And when I was talking to Vervaeke, I shared this model with him, and I had a few questions. Like there was a few points in it that I wasn't totally sure of, and I got to go over it with him. And he was very affirming and very encouraging. And I felt that I really had understood the ideas and that what I had was serviceable, and I felt confident with taking that to the next level and then pushing it forward and
Yeah.
finding a way to share it with people.
Yeah, that's good. And I do. And I think that my conversations, I felt like were more affirming too. Like I sort of had that feeling. And, but something I do want to ask, just walking from the videos, is like you talked a little bit about your history of coming from Protestant background.
Mhm.
And I just want, I don't necessarily want to force you to label yourself or put a box on you, but sort of like where do you sort of see, or do you see yourself still as a Christian? Would you sort of identify, because you said you were interested in the Bible, but you haven't
Mhm.
you haven't sort of like put yourself in sort of like you haven't called yourself a Christian, or you haven't called
Yeah,
yourself a
yeah.
Protestant. So I was wondering, is there something, is it, are you using language very nuanced there, or is what's where are you in that sort of spiritual space?
Yeah, maybe. I call myself messianic, basically. I think that's how people see me. So I have a community of people that I meet with, and we study the Bible and try to apply it together. And we treat the whole Bible as a unity, as one thing. So we see Christ as affirming Moses.
Okay.
And so we take the instructions given to Moses through the lens of Christ and try to apply them that way. So you could say Torah observant or something like that. So we meet on Saturdays and that
Oh,
sort
okay.
of thing. So
So are you big into
that's
concordance then within the Bible as well? Like sort of like finding the connections between different symbols and
yeah, we do that a
different
lot.
ones? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll read Torah portions or Old Testament readings, and then in our discussions we'll bring in New Testament passages and try to find how everything is fitting together
Okay.
and how the scriptures are affirming themselves.
Okay.
So
So do you, so messianic, so are you saying then, I'm just, um it, are you, do you see, do you accept sort of the Trinity sort of in Christianity? Like, do you see Christ as the Son of God, or
well,
where
we
I
don't agree with the Trinity specifically as it's
okay.
presented in most Christian churches, no.
Okay.
But
Yeah.
I do see Christ as the Son of God, yeah,
Okay.
and that he's divine and
Okay. Yeah.
pre-existent.
Oh yeah, okay. I'm just sort of trying to fill the space here. I'm not trying to be, these aren't sort of trying to be gotcha questions.
That's okay.
Yeah. So yeah. Now, what did you also bring in? Like, so Vervaeke brings in like Greek philosophy, and like I'm big on the theological virtues. If you watched my videos, I talk a lot about the theological virtues.
Mhm.
So, and those are, they're in the Bible, but they're also like belay the Greek influences within the Bible and sort of like
Yeah.
other non-Christian texts. So I was wondering, like, are you explore beyond just the Bible with that kind of
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, I explore all kinds of stuff personally. Like I'm a self-directed learner, basically.
Mhm.
So I've been learning online, and I'm an auditory learner. So
Yeah.
podcasts and YouTube have been a huge benefit for me, especially over the last 6 years, where I've been working in my shop all day long, and I learn. So
Yeah, no, it's great. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm a big I think I'm a mostly visual person, but when you're doing tasks and that, I can go through my day and also and keep pay attention to an audio track like a podcast or something as well. And
Mm,
it also engages maybe that part of the dialectical part of your mind that isn't being used for like the work that you might be doing that might be more procedural
yeah,
at
not
the
so
time.
boring.
Yeah. Not so
Yeah,
boring, and it actually keeps you more
yeah,
focused, I think, in a certain
yeah.
way, right?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, no, when I started this practice with my wife, we were newly married, and
Mm,
it's I read the Bible really quickly at that point. I've been pretty obsessed with it. Um, and listened to a lot of sermons and lectures and Christian perspective, Jewish perspective, Hebraic or Messianic perspective. And but when I found Jordan Peterson, I went off into that space,
mm,
right? Because I found his perspective to be really fresh and really interesting. And the manner in which he's speaking to the culture, right, was and drawing people into the Bible and revealing that it's psychologically true
Mm-hmm.
was impactful to me, because I see the Bible as psychologically true. I see it as economically true and socially and politically true, right? It's the principles that are embedded in scripture. When people investigate any of these realms, they discover principles, if they're sincere,
Mm-hmm.
that are in the Bible.
Yeah.
Right. So you can be in whatever discipline and whatever avenue, and if you're searching for truth, you're going to find something that agrees with scripture, I think.
So there's two things that I like about what you said there. The searching for truth thing, but also that you talked about the reality of the Bible and how it applies in these different fields.
Mhm.
And I think and that connects partly to to the sort of symbolism idea as well, in a way that I really like, because I what I described is because I do go to different Bible studies, and some of the people I interact with are biblical literasts, and
Sure, yeah.
right. So well, I'm not denying the literal accuracy of the Bible. I think that what makes the Bible so powerful for me is what I call the sort of the fractal truth of the Bible, right? That it can apply to all these. It's a pattern. It has these. It's a pattern that applies not like to my life as a whole, but also instances within my life, and also the things I interact with, right?
Yeah.
So it's so the biblical story can applies in all these different domains. And really, when people ask me if the Bible is real or how do I know the Bible is real, I like that's what I point to, is and I think Jordan Peterson is no source for the Bible is the most real thing, and that's in those patterns. I think it is how it's the most real thing, because it's not real in just one instance or in
No.
one domain. It's real across the board. The patterns apply everywhere, which means, and
Yeah.
when you have a pattern that is so deeply rooted in everything, it's effectively more real than
Mhm.
just the instance things. That makes sense. The things that are
Yeah.
just, yeah.
Yeah, because once you've passed through a circumstance, right? Once the thing has happened or the interaction is over, then it's in the past,
Mm-hmm.
right? But the pattern is still there.
Yeah.
It's still informing the next circumstance. So in that way, it's more real than circumstance. But in the direct embodied experience way, the circumstance is more real than the pattern.
Yeah. And the
So
patterns in that sense too are then outside of time and space. The truth of the pattern is outside of time and space, because it's
the
not,
origin of it,
you can
I'd
say, yeah,
say.
the origin of it. Yeah. But that's because it will occur again, or it can be applied in these different domains. And actually, as I started
Mhm.
speaking with maybe the word you don't use for this is domain, because I noticed you using domain in another important context. But your first let's say metaphysical bifurcation of the world, like your two big buckets,
Mhm.
are symbol and science,
Yeah,
right?
those are just examples of two buckets, right? So when you have, like you say, the bifurcation of the world, that's the creation of the world. So in verse 1 it says he creates heaven and earth,
Mm-hmm.
right? So you start with a pair. And so like what you're saying with the opponent processing, the reason it's so the reason it affords so much value to your perspective is because it's so fundamental,
Yeah.
because the origin and of existence, the beginning of existence is in a pair, and the origin of existence is beyond existence itself, right? So God is outside of creation in
Yeah.
order to create creation. God is a unity, but within creation, it's all expressed through tension between dualities.
Okay, that's interesting. So you're talking about like there's this tension between dualities, but you're sort of seeing
Right.
that sort of that sort of separate from the unity of God.
It's
Um
it's dependent on the unity of God, because the
Dependent
unity
on,
of
yeah,
God
okay,
is
that's
the transcendent and the immanent, right?
mm-hmm.
Is God holding creation from above and from below, and then the thing that is within creation are all these dualities. So God is resolving the duality within himself. So he's the solution to the paradox. But the paradox, as far as we can get within the frame of our investigation, right? Because the frame of our investigation is within creation.
Okay.
So we can't get there, but we intuit that it's there. We know that he's there, but he's beyond.
So you see that sort of God is resolving this duality in himself. Like that was the phrase that you used.
Yeah, he expresses it. So he sends out, right? He breathes into creation and then he speaks. He says, let there be light, and then there's light and darkness, right? But then the creation, when it recognizes God and we worship him, when we dedicate our life back to him, right? When he receives our spirit, then we find our resolution and our true identity in him. Yeah. So everything goes out from him and everything returns to him.
Okay. So yeah, so I'm just sort of like trying to find, like, because you're introducing new ideas here all the time, so I'm just trying to get something to hold on to. Like I like the ideas you're introducing, but where I think what I'm I guess I want to connect it to like the hope and faith.
Yeah. Well, that's the duality.
Yeah,
right. But so the beginning, the heaven and earth, right? The moment that something is in creation, that it has this kind of binary nature, whether it's heaven and earth or light and dark or land and sea, right? Those are all examples of opponent processing.
Okay. I don't know if all those are examples of opponent processing, but I think that you're right that there's the fundamental nature of like opponent processing is fundamental, but only if it's used in sort of this process of discernment. And and so like when you're going through like the hope and let's actually sort of like get back into the symbol and science, because I don't want to, we're bringing in all these concepts, so it actually makes it harder to sort of
it's too abstract.
It gets too abstract. You're going way too abstract. So and symbol and science is abstract enough. What I'd actually connect it to, and I think you did this a couple of times in your article and your video, is the whole of theory and practice. And I actually like, so hope and faith, like hope is the expansive force, right? It's the potential, it's the world of possibilities. Faith is so it's connected to theory, right? Your hope is the theory is the possibilities, the potential, and then the faith is in the practice.
Yeah.
Right. So it's practical, and it's in that it's actually going out and testing your theories, right? And that's actually when you talk about the test of faith, right? Is that's what that's what we're getting at, is like we're testing the possibility to see if it's true, if it's actually in good faith. And I think that there's actually a connection to that with why first, like just the resurrection, like Jesus being the purest hope, right? In the season we are now in Advent and in Christmas, like this unlikely possibility of the Messiah being born in a manger, that being the purest hope, and that being like proven beyond a doubt by the actual test, the purest test of faith, which is the crucifixion, right? So he actually going to, well, if this is the Messiah, then he can resurrect himself. He can transcend the suffering of the world, right? So that's the actual actualization that then realizes where Christ becomes that sort of that like proves his nature as the good, the true, and the beautiful, like the thing that we're looking for, right? The possibility that we're actually looking for, that sort of, that, as you said, God solves the problem, or solving the problem, right? Where you sort of said like
it's like how he is the fullness of hope and faith. So he comes for everyone, right?
Mm-hmm.
But at the crucifixion, at the moment of faith, like who's there? There's very few people with him at the end. Yeah. Well, I mean, but the people,
I think the people are with him are representative of the suffering he's going through as well, right? So it's not just physical pain or suffering that he's enduring. He's also has to endure like his mother being there, right? So the person who loves him most. So he sees the suffering of the person he who loves him most suffering because of his suffering, right? So that's sort of a second order suffering that is part of that experience that Christ's going through, and also is the rejection and ingratitude of the people that he's bearing this burden of suffering for, right? I think that's another element to the purity of the sort of like the multi levels of the suffering of the crucifixion, is this whole idea that like the ingratitude and outright rejection of all these people whose sins he's bearing as well. So there's multiple levels of this suffering that he needs to transcend.
So are you you're making a connection between suffering and faith?
Yeah, I think that it is, because the suffering is the test of faith, right? Of the reason why we have it's actually how we discover the wheat from the shaft, right? The bad faith and the good faith, right? Because Christ goes to hell, but he comes back up. And that sort of proves that he's true, right? That he's legitimate, not just he's actually good and of this world, is that he actually goes through this. He comes back from the tile. He actually, and in this sense also, like he's this is connecting to something else in the Bible. He's actually taking the path that we have to take, right? So he's actually showing that, like, look, if you're good too, then I will help you, but you can also go through this process of being separated from your sins, and something good will still be there that will be reign and become transcend to heaven.
Yeah, so that so with what you say about the faithful network seeking to retain identity, right? And then including the dynamic of suffering, there's a reduction, right? So within the network, then the faithful network, there's an excess of identity, right? And it has to be reduced in order to find the core, to find the essence, the essential identity, that which actually cannot be gone without.
Yeah.
And so the crucifixion is the example of the
reductive process.
The ultimate end of the thing that cannot be gone without.
And well, you could also describe it as the burning away of the dead wood, right? Like this is
exactly,
right. And that's what Jordan Peterson talks about, the burning away of the dead wood. When Christ goes through the process, which is suffering, right? And when he goes through that suffering process, there's very little. He's sinless, so there's so very little dead wood to be burned away, right? So all of what Christ is survives the process, right? And is resurrected, right? And that and that legitimates him as the purest hope and
as the purest good, as the only good.
Yes.
But he considered himself not to be good, but he remained.
Yes.
He was alive. So and then you have this distillation of faith, right? And then you have the resurrection, which is the expansion of hope.
Yeah.
Right. So then you have this expression of inclusion where all these people are raised as he's raised. And then you have the ultimately the Great Commission and the sending out, right? The seeking to include now.
Well, I think that's actually gets to the nature of good, right? Because and that's going to be an interesting question, because it isn't entirely clear where good and evil sort of come up in your metaphysics. Like sort
in
of
my
like,
metaphysics.
Oh yeah, and in sort of your picture of the world.
What I'm talking about in the way that I've been presenting things, it's not a moral structure. Exactly.
Oh, that's interesting.
It's a real structure. So the dynamics apply, whether somebody is moral or immoral, whether something's good or evil, right? They're still nested within a pattern.
Okay,
And
so
they're
but you're
still
separating
subject.
those. And
They're
then
still
it,
sub
okay, because
they're still subject to the dynamics of the pattern, right? And somebody can be faithful to their sin, or somebody can be in a practice and then aligning themselves and then back into a practice, and they can be going down into death.
okay, so there
But
is
they're still subjects to the basic, modal exchange of being.
yeah, okay.
Alt-
So let's say there's so there's the good, so you, because your two big buckets are
yeah,
science and
science is symbol.
symbolism.
Yeah.
And it's interesting. Let's go somewhere else from the good and evil from now, and we'll get back there, because there's something like my sort of two big buckets there are going to be the faith and hope, right? Or that's how I'm going to map onto your sort of science and symbolism. And I think actually what's caused a lot of the confusion of the Enlightenment, like I say, the Enlightenment caused a wound or a birth, had birthing pains that are unresolved or did not heal well, right? So there's wounds caused by the birth of the Enlightenment, and I think a big part of that is that the sort of the demonization of faith, because it is this reductive process, and we want to cling on to so much hope, so much false, I would say false hopes, not, and we confuse them with true hopes, but and part of it is, the problem was that science came along and demonstrated a reductive process that people could then use and say, oh, this is the replacement for faith. We don't need faith anymore. We have the scientific method, and this can actually be what we can use then to be our reductive process, right? That
it sounds like you're using faith in two different senses there.
well, I'm using it in a more general sense that can be then specified. But let's hear it, because I don't think that uses it. And let me just sort of say that I want to make clear what the problem with that is, though, too, right? So the scientific method works well for well-defined problems, right? You need in order to get the scientific method working off the ground, you need to have a well-defined problem, which means you have to define the problem. Most problems in life,
objects with boundaries.
yeah, you also need like a fail criteria and success criteria. You have to, and you have to have a structured methodology, and they have to have reproductivity. Like there's all these things it has to be well structured. But most problems in life,
you need to be able to, it needs to be able to inhabit a regulated frame.
Yeah, you need, but most of the problems we face in life are not well-defined problems, or ill-defined problems. And this is why we're not built fundamentally to do science. We're built fundamentally to do the process, what I call discernment, right? Or this process of which is a more effective way of solving ill-defined problems, because you can actually find the frame of the problem as part of the process of discernment, which is like why the opponent processing, or establishing opponent processing, or what you're talking about, the duality, is so critical to that process.
If a problem is really well defined intuitively to a person, then it's not a problem, right? It's just a process.
Well, but we can also use more specialized tools that can give us more specific answers then, right? So then we can use rules of reason, like symbolic logic, or strict rules of reason, or a scientific method to solve a well-defined problem. And that's wildly powerful in that specified domain, but in the more generalized domain, discernment becomes king, right? And that's, I think, what, if we're talking in evolution, why we are the creatures we are, is that we have this, we're built to do discernment, and just the reductive process and discernment is faith.
Right. Yeah. It's part of that. It's the retention, right? Yeah. And so hope is like inclusion.
Yeah. And hope is the expansive.
Yeah.
is expands the right. So it's and when we're talking about the two, when it talking about the two networks, the faithful network is the network that's sort of more rigid and rule following, is looking, and then the hopeful network is the flexible network that's going to be more open to examples.
Yeah.
And I think that, that gets to a lot of what you're talking about, being stuck in one mode or the other,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
To connect it, what you're um in your framework.
Yeah.
If
Yeah. So I would put it as the faithful network, right, is too self-referential. Right. So if the faithful network is inwardly focused and it's not accepting any input from the hopeful network, right, it's only referring to itself and it's not allowing for any inclusion, then that's what I would say is stuck in the scientific mode.
yeah,
And
yeah,
if the hopeful network is too hopeful, right, and it's only seeking renewal and it's only seeking new inclusion, but it's doesn't have a consistent reference by which to judge what it's including, then it's too hopeful. It's not being regulated.
yeah.
And that's what I would call being stuck in the symbolic mode.
So and if I should always just bring this up all the time because it comes up in all my videos so far, but 1 Corinthians 13, Paul actually describes that, right? So, and he describes it in terms very similar to what I think you've described it, right? So firstly, when you're in the if you're in the world of just faith, which is the first one you described, where you described it as you're stuck in this reductive process. Sorry, if you could.
Yeah, you're totally self-referential.
So self-referential. Okay.
So not allowing for any inclusion.
Any inclusion part is the thing that I think is important, because the way Paul describes it is 1 Corinthians 13, verse 3, if I give away all my possessions and if I hand over my body so that I may boast, but I do not have love, I gain nothing. Right. So it's this idea of, you're giving it away, but there's the key phrase there, I think is at the end, I gain nothing. In the King James version, it's it profiteth me nothing, right? Because where there's nothing, you were saying nothing's included, right? You're nothing, there's no additional process, right?
Yeah. So there becomes no increase.
Yeah. And so it looks like the other side of it, right? The hope side of it. If I have, so this is idea of like being too hopeful and not connected to faith through charity or love. So you just have just the hopeful network, the problem of the hopeful network in isolation. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and have all knowledge, so if I'm including everything, right? So if you're including everything, then then there's nothing concrete. And if I have all faith, so like that's what I was going to say, if I have all faith, then you have no faith, right? So as to remove the mountains, but do not have love, I am nothing, right?
Yeah. If you have no boundary,
yes,
then you have no definition.
Faith in everything is the same as no faith. It's effectively,
yeah. And then you can say, oh, I have no problem. But it's a frame, it's a dynamic problem, because the reason there's no problem is because there's no definition, there's no object, there's no thing. Then you have nothing.
Yeah. So let's get here. So this is actually where I think for me evil comes in, right? Is when you have these processes or these forces that are unbounded by love or charity, right? So there's no opponent processing. What I describe it as the system becomes adversarial, right? So the like the hopeful network decides it's no longer going to be listening to the faithful network, because it would rather keep it's become too attached to its sin, which is the false hopes, the hopes that need to be given away. It's become a hope hoarder, right? It's filling it's filling its house with newspapers it's never going to read. It's a hope hoarder, right? And that unregulated process is into the realm of sin, and that's evil. It's the absence of good, because when it breaks the discernment and you're not getting to the good. The other side, though, for the faithful side is if you get into bad faith. So bad faith occurs when you're, like you said, you're self-referential. I don't know if I'm going to call it self-referential, but I can see what you're getting at. The way I would describe it is you're stuck in your heuristic, right? You're stuck in your mode of reduction, and it's no longer serviceable.
Yeah.
Like, so it's bad faith, and you're not opening yourself up to new possibilities, or reevaluating that faith, right? So it ends up becoming ill fit to the purpose, either because the world's moved on, or something you're not responsive to change, or it never was a very good, it never was doing, it never was optimized in the first place. So the small errors that it's making have increased dramatically, right? Like, so example, if I'm eating compounded, right? So if, like, it's compounded, like, so actually here's a good of how it compounds. So my faith practice, and my practice is I'm losing weight, and I decide to have like this, go on this strict diet, right, where I'm eating certain things. Now I might have a vitamin imbalance in this diet that I'm unaware of, and I'm successfully losing weight. But if I never reevaluate the diet, even when I start feeling ill because of it and sick, then I'll never realize the error. The problem with my faith, the bad faith, will compound and reveal itself, right? So you need that expansive process to open yourself up to the possibilities of what's wrong with your practice, right?
Yeah. So I would characterize that as half of the possible error states. So I would call that network failure. I would call that a faithful error, because each network is being faithful to its motive to the degree that they're no longer communicating, right? The one is just over here grabbing everything, and the one over here is just shrinking.
Yeah.
Right? And they're being faithful to their modes. And so that the network is an error. And the other error, I would say, is hopeful error, where the networks overlap to the degree that there's no longer a difference between them.
Okay, yeah. So actually, we're getting into something else here that I talk about, because I connect this to the idea of there's negative psychotechnologies, and there's psychotechnologies, or things that try and enhance discernment. Like, I believe dialogos is a process that enhances our ability, our discernment ability. But there's also psychotechnologies, because there's interests in maintaining bad faiths and false hopes. There's negative psychotechnologies. So there's techniques that are used to jam discernment. And two of those that are prevalent is like this idea of false what do you call it? What's the word? When everyone agrees, false consensus, right? So
it's a hopeful error.
It's a hopeful error. It's exactly, these are actually ways that hope breaks, throws monkey wrenches. And one is false consensus, where no one's allowed to actually voice their concerns or opposition, because that would be seen as adversarial. So everyone has to pretend to agree, and so the actual concerns are not really brought to the fore, right?
Yeah.
The other hopeful error that can occur is the cacophony, right? And this is one of the reasons why I do this. I focus on this. The dialogos you need to have the opponents that are clear, so they can form the loving connection. And this actually, I think I always go to Matthew 18:20 for this, where he says, where Jesus says, if 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, then I am among you. I think that 2 or 3 is very important, because you need to have the small numbers, or at least a relationship that, could be the 2 or 3 could be a preacher in a congregation, but you have to have the formalization of this sort of back and forth. So
a preacher in a congregation they're not a balanced relationship.
It doesn't have to be a balanced relationship, because it can be opponent. They can have different perspectives, but they need to be able to listen to each other, right? They need to be able to, so they can form the loving relationship.
It's a different structure, because like the way that you're representing the network is a horizontal connection. like the faithful and the hopeful, they
Yeah.
come together. And I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying, that that can exist between a speaker and a crowd, or
Yeah.
between an authority and their constituents, but that's a
Yes.
vertical relationship.
Okay. What I'm trying to, yeah, that's it's sort of a side to what I'm putting on is when I'm comparing that is that's a way that you can have a larger, but you need to be able to form that loving connection. And what the other way besides creating false consensus is to create cacophony. This is other way you can do the hopeful, or you can jam the system on the hopeful side, is to
Mhm.
say everyone needs to have a say, even if they don't
Right.
have a relevant say. And what it creates is cacophony, where it breaks the loving relationship. And you go to 1 Corinthians 13. I speak as if I speak in the tongue of mortals and of angels. So I'm speaking clearly, but if I do not have love, I am of a noisy gong or clanging cymbal, right?
Yeah.
And that's what
That,
happens is you have lots of people speaking. You're saying, we just need everyone an equal chance to speak. The love will break down, and you'll just have everyone being noisy cymbals. You'll have a lot of noise and nothing will be resolved.
yeah.
You have hopeful error again, as you describe it.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting because the both of those things are kind of flattening. So
Yeah,
everybody shares belief, or
yeah,
everybody is equally informed, right, by accepting the same information, or everybody is equally expressive
yeah,
by being allowed the same volume of expression.
yes,
And those are both flattening a hierarchy, so that
yeah,
you no longer have those nodes of two or three.
yeah,
And the Old Testament says, by two or three witnesses a matter is established,
yeah,
right? So it's the same idea. And then you
yeah,
have two or three, and then you have each of these groups witnessing to an authority. So the
yeah.
authority is actually a bridge between the networks. And then that authority has their paired references, right? And then
Mhm.
you end up with that fractal structure.
Yeah, I see where you're going, but I just want to get on the touch on the point is that advocacy for flattening can easily be done with equity claims, right? So people always
Yeah,
say
yeah,
it's
yeah.
like, yeah. So
Yeah,
there is sort of there is a political language,
yeah.
and that is like saying, oh, we need that creates that. But you're right. I think where you took it was very interesting too, because you sort of said, well, look, as you have you can create this stacking structure of hierarchy, and where they're
Yeah.
feeding into each other. Um, but then
So you have
the neat thing is, yeah,
every
but
network pair has vertical and horizontal.
or more, right? Like you can
Yeah,
have
yeah.
like you don't have to limit it to just 2 or 3 dimensions, right? You can have it sort of an n dimension thing. Um, but the problem has to be that it is, if you're doing that, then they have to be self-regulating, and that's what the dialogos, or the opponent processing, provides, right?
Yeah.
Is if the relationships are all self-regulating, then the network, we use flexibility in another sense, but the network has resilience. It's probably a better word, is a good word here, right?
Yeah.
Because it doesn't require uh external regulation, because the regulation is occurring
But it will,
between the
though,
nodes.
like, because the networks, so like this conversation, right, like that's an example of the network, right? Because you're talking about opponent processing.
Yes, yeah,
So one of us will make a claim and the other one can question the claim, and that's the hopeful and the faithful process, right?
yes,
But our relationship is nested within a whole set of relationships of different scales, right? So the network itself is not isolated. It requires other comparable networks that it can use as references. Like Paul van der Klay's been talking lately about sanity and how society kind of sets standards for what's considered to be sane and what can be expressed. And so we use comparable horizontal references, and then also we're all submitted to different authorities, right?
yeah.
We've all been taught, we've all been trained up, and so we have
There's
these vertical references as well.
well, I actually want to touch on that too, because actually something I was having a conversation last night, and Mark, and his last name's escaping me right now, made this interesting point that virtues can only be defined by distributed cognitions, right? That agents of distributed cognition. So one way I think of just agents of distributed cognition are institutions. That a virtue, you can't actually come up of virtues on your own. And this sort of struck me, it really is true at the time. And I think I'm going to say, like, one of the reasons that that's true is because what you're actually creating there, virtue is an archetype, right? And you need, in order for that archetype, there has to be an archetype is a type that is created by as an aim or an exemplar, and that exemplar has to be something external to yourself, or something that's been provided to you almost by definition, right? You can't you can create stereotypes by yourself, where you're actually taking multiple instances from your life and creating it as sort of and from the, that's what stereotype means, taking multiple instances and fashioning a type from it. That's a model of the world, and that's any of these models or these types are going to be faith, like a faith model that you can then use for discernment. And it'll be either good or bad. It'll probably be it'll be a heuristic that is somewhere between, that is imperfect in some way, but will hopefully be useful. But archetypes, I think in their nature, they have to be provided you from as you said, like a hierarchy, or from some system larger than yourself that you are accepting or embracing the judgment of.
Yeah, I like to use the word authority.
Authority is good. Yeah, you use authority.
Yeah, because the authority is the author, is the one who wrote the book on the topic. Right. So the people to whom you defer your identification of truth to. So somebody tells you this is what the weather is in Dallas, and you're like, okay, I'm going to accept that as being true because this person is closer to Dallas than I am, and so they're an authority on that, right? And so by virtue of their authority, they're now informing you, and you take this information and you act, and you go out into the world and you spread this authority, right, as an agent.
Okay.
And so the back to the networks, there's the idea of scaling the network within a fractal structure, I think, is important, because I think the dynamic that you're talking about is essential, like the opponent process between faith and hope. But the faithful side, so that process between the networks also has to happen within each of the networks. So it scales down and it multiplies.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
Right?
it's
So
I would actually say every relationship, there is an internal, and this is okay. So this is actually how what you were talking about, meaningless and despair. Like, I think that this isolation between, and you actually sort of said, like, you have to, if you're probably stuck in one mode, I think is actually how you described it. It's how this process of discernment is how we actually resolve the being meaning problem. So I differentiate from Vervaeke, because he really likes to keep a lid on it. I think he doesn't want to get it too into theology, so he tries to make it say that it's just a meaning problem. It's a meaning crisis, but it's also, I think, a being crisis, because these identities that we are creating are not being connected to essence.
Right.
And then an idea that an identity that's not connected to essence is purely performative. And we need to connect in order to actually be like an identity that is connected to essence is being. In order to be, we actually have to go through that process of discerning authenticity, which is connected to it. So like your result, there's a crisis, there's a meaning crisis. So but there's also an identity crisis, which is this crisis of being. So it's both the being problem and the meaning problem that need to be resolved. And they're really just two ways of looking at the same problem, because I'm sort of, I am what I do, and what I do sort of defines what I am.
Yeah, they're the eccentric and concentric sides of identity.
Yes, exactly. Right.
Yeah.
Actually, I would say the eccentric and concentric sides of being, or you could say authentic, if you want to take out the verb, authentic identity, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I presume authenticity.
Well, you shouldn't. We're in a
If-
postmodern era. You
yeah,
you should
no, no,
definitely
not
not
this.
pursue
I'm talking about actual identity, not
yeah.
self-professed identity. So,
Yeah.
but I have a similar intuition. Like the model that I'm working towards describing includes a description, a visual description of the 4 ways of knowing that
Mm-hmm.
John talks about. And so my argument is that each way of knowing is actually, that's the function side, the way of knowing. And there's a nature side for each way of knowing is connected to a layer of being. So there's there's 4 aspects of being, right? And these aspects of being are expressed through each of these ways of knowing. So that's a similar to what I think that's a similar dynamic to what you were just describing.
It is similar because
crisis.
I've been thinking about the 4 ways of knowing, and I think this may actually, I don't know if I want to get this deep into the metaphysics, but I can because I think that it's because when we talk about I think you talked about it about I liked what you said in your video. I can't remember if I can remember the exact words, but I describe the Father sometimes as the infinite that is finite, and the
I've heard you say that.
the Son as the finite that is infinite.
Right.
So when you're saying that, when I'm saying that the infinite is finite, it's actually gets to what you were saying, that because there's what I wish maybe I'll spur you actually saying it, because I like how you phrase it, but it's because in the sense that there's patterns in reality, in the chaos that we can grab onto, that there's order that we can discern, and we can sort of grasp onto things and create knowledge. That's what makes that's sort of the finite that parts of the infinite, right? Because it's like we can't comprehend the cosmos, but it has these patterns that allow us to create objects and to actually make at least make parts of it sensible,
right?
Right,
like the idea that we can't grasp reality itself.
Yeah, but we can,
because we're limited to this little slice.
Yeah, I don't know. A slice sounds too concrete, because it's really, it's like it's the no thingness, but we can create things. There's something about, so Vervaeke's no thingness, like it's that sort of blobby, the thing under the objective layer before we are, because I think that objects are something that we actually project onto the world, like this way. So we're actually
chaotic potential.
Yeah, the chaotic potential. That we're making sense of it. So when we make the world sensible. Like the world is sensible because
it is. Yeah,
the world is sensible, and that's what I'm sort of really getting at with that's the finite part of the infinite, right? That we can actually sort of say, okay, no, we can actually glimpse parts of it. A holistic understanding is beyond us, but we can touch the surface. We can actually sort of have this sort of relationship with it, right? Of the chaotic potential, and that's actually sort of the order that we experience. Does that make sense? I don't know if you could put it better.
I feel like I understand what you're saying. I feel like we probably would get into a semantic argument there. Okay. But I agree with what you're saying, that the infinite expresses itself in reality, and we can experience and recognize characteristics of the infinite by its expression in creation, right? That's like Romans 1.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
God is known because of creation.
Yeah. So let's actually and let's actually go back, I think, to this sort of process of discernment, because like what you put in the center of the symbol in science is
Mhm.
the self, right?
Yeah.
And
They'll start with S, so it sounded good.
yeah, okay, yeah. So, but what I put there is, and I sort of hinted at it when we were talking about the crucifixion, is Christ, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And and what I connect Christ to is like there's two gifts of Christ that are present. I'm Catholic, that are presented in communion, right? There's the blood of Christ and the body of Christ, right? And I see the blood of Christ is connected to the Holy Spirit, and I and the Holy Spirit is that which connects us to God. It's sort of let's put that aside for now, because that's not what I want to focus on. It's the body of Christ that I want to focus on, because the body of Christ, I think I often will describe as the true, which you talk a lot about truth, but I also want to connect it to the good and the beautiful. And why I talk about these three things, or sort of lump them together like this, is because I think that those are all things. They're all the things that we find through discernment, right? These are things that can be that are so elemental, that are fonts of essence, right? That they do not require definition. In fact, they defy definition. And I think that Mathieu Pajot said this about heaven, and heaven is connected to this too. And I think he was absolutely right. He said, like, if I define it in words, someone asked him, well, can you define for me what you say, what do you mean about heaven? If I define it in words, it'll be less than what I'm actually describing. And that's
Yeah,
true
yeah.
of the good, the true, and the beautiful, right? Is that they need to be discovered through discernment. And they can't be defined by words, because they're actually what they're so linked to essence. They're such purely linked to essence that words, all the words are what comes from them, right? Like words are lesser shadows and reflections of these things that are so elemental to what they are, that they provide the sustenance of us, right? So things that we connect to this is like the miracle of the loaves, right? It's what provides food. If we know what's true, what's good, or what's beautiful, like what's true and what's good, we apply that to agriculture. We find what's true and good in agriculture. We produce food. We can make bread. We can provide these bounties of society.
Yeah.
Beauty is the same thing. It provides this transcendent experience, right? And I describe these are the finite that are infinite, because they actually they have this property, like, the other symbols that I connect to this is the fountain of youth, or the Holy Grail, or the cornucopia
Yeah.
is right. It's these things that once we discern them, they keep on giving. They actually provide life, and in a sense, it's what we as living creatures seek to connect with, because it's essentially it's the most it's how we connect to God. It's how we connect to reality, and how it's what gives us our limited powers of creation, is how well we can connect to the good, the true, and the beautiful.
Yeah, we can recognize primordial virtue through transcendent intuition. So we need to scale our perspective, right, to find something that is more encompassing than the circumstance that we're experiencing. But if we can connect our circumstance, through our circumstance, to something greater, something that is beyond, right, and we can inhabit that, then we take what is valid there, and we can call it down, right, or realize it into the next circumstance. So I call this transposition. So we recognize a pattern, and then we find what is essential to that pattern, and then we can superimpose it over other instances,
Yeah.
right? And so we're transposing a pattern, and that is the practical value of a transcendent perspective. And so, like you said, that beauty gives us a transcendent experience,
Mhm.
or it helps us to see beyond. There's this idea that you can see past or see through or see beyond what is in front of you to something which is
Or
giving that
connect,
light.
yeah, you can actually see
Yeah.
how it connects to something greater than itself, right? If you
Yeah. Yeah.
actually,
Yeah.
if you see a beautiful picture or
Yeah.
something, then that picture, and it's the finite that is infinite. Like you can actually see how it's connected to this greater pattern.
Yeah. And
um
it entrains you in the recognition of beauty. And through entrainment in the recognition of beauty, then you're prone to the expression of beauty.
yeah, yeah,
And now you have a relationship with beauty.
yeah. And you
Yeah.
can actually bring that into other instances in other parts of your life, like you were saying. I think, yeah, you had a fun word for it, wasn't from transcendence, you had, was it
Transposition.
just transposition? Okay,
Yeah.
you were using
Transcendence
transposition.
affords transposition.
Transcendence affords transposition. Okay, yeah, I see what you're
Yeah.
saying there, and I think that's true, and that's that process of transcendence affording transposition is where we get these ideas that are connected to, like, I'm connecting to the body of Christ, but also this idea of the miracle of the loaves of the fishes, this idea of eternal life, right? Or that, like, which is like the fountain of youth, but also is described that, like, heaven, we have this idea of the mustard seed, right, of heaven.
Yeah. It's
So
the
it's,
seed. Yeah. It's the
yeah,
seed.
the mustard seed creates this transposition where it's like you can create a kingdom of heaven out of a tiny out of a tiny seed. It's just the seed of the true, the good, and beautiful.
Yeah. So the seed is the faithful element,
Yeah,
right?
it's
and
the
and and it retains what is true from its parent,
yeah,
right?
I
So
see it.
from the fruit you gain the seed.
So actually, yeah, I would actually, but it's I would say it's the good, right? So because it's what survives, like Christ survives the process of discernment, right? It's the we're talking about the mustard seed, not a particular seed. um it's what just you it's first, it's the hope, it's the hope that's been tested by faith and survived, right? So it's not a false hope, and it's the action, it's not a bad, it's the product that's left over from presumably a good test of faith, because it's something has been produced from it, whereas a bad faith will just destroy. A good faith will actually create. So there's something here that's left out of this after this process of discernment, and that's the and then that thing can then be, as you said, transposed into other domains or other instances.
That's the fruitfulness of
The
it
fruitfulness, yeah,
when
that's
it
cool.
multiplies.
Yeah,
Yeah. So the fruitfulness, I would say, is hopeful action.
yeah,
And then the retention of the seed is faithful action.
yeah,
Because you're talking
yeah.
about how the suffering of Christ is an example of faith, right? And then when he talks to his disciples, he says, unless the body dies and is planted in the earth,
Mhm.
right? It doesn't.
So I just here's sort of like a way of fleshing that out that I was talking about. So you have um the faith side and the hope side, right? So
Yeah.
um there, what really sort of was the connecting tissue for me was talking to Jonathan Pageau and having this connection of the snakes, there being two snakes, and snakes being agents of change. So it's actually the movement between, right? And that's the faith and hope, and that's what you're talking about too, the movement is being critical to it. And that's what what sort of set me up is this connected to, even God cannot make a garden without snakes. And this becomes the sort of the where evil comes into the picture, is the evil comes into the picture, is that the snakes can become treacherous, right? So there's the bronze snake, which is the movement from the movement towards faith, right? The concentric movement. And then there's the green snake in Genesis, the green snake, which is the eccentric movement, like the opening up to more possibilities, right? And these snakes can become treacherous, and they can overshoot the mark or break the love, break the charity, and
Yeah.
that stops the concernment, and that creates the absence of the good, or the disconnect from the good, which
The loss of tension.
loss of tension. Yeah, you could say, yeah, you could talk, you can use those was it the pre-Socratic references to Heraclitus, sort of like the loss of tension there. But yeah, that idea.
Yeah,
Of,
because it's not just the disconnect, right? But it's also the excessive overlap. So whether you have excessive overlap or you have a lack of connection, either way, there's no tension.
Yeah. But
So,
this, yeah, I think, but the snakes end up, what they do is they create this sort of sense of self-worship. So they still create, you end up in this dynamic system. Well, not, well, okay, let's but you end up
once
in
the
this,
tension's gone, it's no
yeah.
longer dynamic.
Well, but the snakes want, okay, well, at least the green snake wants more change. You could maybe say that there's also like the bronze snake wants to maintain the false hope. Essentially, it creates tyranny, right? The tyranny of bad faith.
Yeah, faithful
Where
error.
error, right? Yeah. So
I would say the green snake leads to hopeful error, and the brown snake leads to faithful error, right?
yeah, when
But
when they're
both of
not
those
under
elements of
control.
change are, yeah, both elements are necessary. You need the eccentric and concentric
Absolutely.
exchange.
Or you don't have any discernment, right?
Exactly.
And that's actually, but that's where you get this idea like of Saint Michael, putting his foot on the neck of Satan, right? And there's multiple instances and examples of where when Christ or God encounters Satan, they don't destroy Satan. They have the opportunity to do that. No, they send him back to the underworld, or they put him underfoot. Because he, even though he's rebelled against God, he's still doing his job. God still forces him to do his job, and that's sort of what's expressed by this idea of Saint Michael putting his foot on his neck. It's like, no, you get back to work. You have to be under the control. You have to be under the control of the logos, right? You can't, your rebellion is thwarted, and so we continue the process of discernment, but you still are playing your role. You still have your place in the heavens or in the cosmos. You still have your role to play.
The opportunity for hopeful error.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the moving back to hope. So
yeah, because if there's no opportunity for error, then the faithful network has no role, because everything can be included.
Yeah, it's but so I actually used two other virtues to describe the motion, right? So the motion, the virtuous motion of from faith to hope is mercy, right? Because it's the creation of an exception of the rule, and it's actually envisioned by the image that I just described of Saint Michael putting his foot on Satan's neck, even though he's broken the law of God and essentially is a source of evil. It's like, no, it's like there's mercy here, and the mercy is allowing you to exist, right? Your shenanigans will. Sorry,
I liked what you said there about. Can you rephrase that again? The faithful network relating to the hopeful network.
Yeah, the faithful network relating to the holy. It's mercy is the virtue of change, is the virtuous motion from that network to the network, and it's right. And it's
yeah, that was good. I like that.
Yeah, and it's and I see it especially in Catholic theology all the time, is this discussion of mercy, and I think that's exactly what they're talking about, and it's the why Batman and Superman don't kill people, or at least didn't in the traditional comics. Is that essential, the need for mercy of within the system. But let's look at the other side, because this is the one that I think has been demonized from Enlightenment, probably partly because of the discomfort that intellectuals have with faith, right? Is the motion from hope to faith is zeal, and people have and to present people as zeal as a virtue, I find, especially if you talked about people who, and I liked how you did this too, and because I've observed the same thing, people who sort of operate in the more what I say the faith domain, or you just have science domain, or the spiritual or the hope domain.
Yeah,
those hope people, they don't like
Yeah, I think using the word spiritual or hope is better for the conversation.
Yeah. Yeah, because I think science gets confusing because the science also implies sort of an intellectualism, but like because you think of more academics. But I think that the people who are more faith driven are people who are more practical and more connected to reality, right? Which is why you see like Dutch farmers and truckers protesting because they don't like the results of the theoreticians that who would truck that who technocratically run their lives, right? They have this, well, this isn't working for us. We have practical jobs that we have to do, and we have no way of there's been a breakdown between the communications in the network, and we have no way of voicing our concerns here. We're not being listened to.
Yeah.
But they're more on that sort of faith, getting stuff done side of things,
Yeah,
right?
it's kind of, it can, I think it can be, when you fall into error states, things can be a little bit counterintuitive, right? Because if the faithful network is rejecting, or if the hopeful network is rejecting, right, it means that they're rejecting a particular network, right? But having a hopeful characteristic is naturally, it naturally, or in reality, requires a faithful counterbalance.
Yeah.
And so they'll choose an alternative, right? Or they'll become subject to a different expression of that dynamic that's perverse and that's out of balance.
Yeah, but
So
on that, the perverse and out of balance. Yeah, I think you're right about that. But just so let's connect that back to the zeal thing, because I think zeal is essential, and it's because it's what overcomes passivity, right? Is this desire to actually actualize or realize something in the world. It takes zeal, and
yeah, it's enacting truth.
Yeah. So it needs, and of course, but just like mercy can go wrong, zeal can go wrong. But you'll hear people often when they're discussing zeal, they'll only talk about the ways it can go wrong and only use sort of which are the negative connotations of it, but the positive connotations I think are essential. And I think it's because there's that reductive aspect of faith, that the exclusionary aspect of faith, of like, because you're denying false possibilities, right? Know that raccoon that's frothing in the mouth cannot come in and be our pet. It's just right. I don't care how cute you think its tail it is.
Yeah, he's so funny.
Yeah,
he's funny.
that's that the denial of false possibilities is something that people have that find discomfort in, and it's partly because and it's essential to the process of discernment, and it's used by people who, or forces that want to block discernment. It's the easiest target is to go after zeal and go after actualization, because then there's also that when you don that's the heroic movement, like you're taking on responsibility at that point, right? So you're becoming a focus of responsibility, and because you're actualizing or potentializing, there's a singularity, like there is necessarily a focus there, where you have the other motion, you have this expansion or diffusion, this diffusion process, and you have the diffusion of responsibility, so it becomes very hard to see what's actually going on.
The zeal is the return to the center.
The
mercy is reaching to the edge.
It is.
So you have mercy and zeal, and mercy and zeal. It's breathing out and in.
It is breathing out and in, and that's the three R's, Vervaeke's 3 R's, right? A recursive relevance realization is describing that the dynamism of that healthy system, right? Is that you're recursively doing it, like your breath in and out. Each
iteration is informed by all previous iterations.
Yes, each iteration is informed by all previous iterations, or is it? And it's there's relevance, right? The searching for what is relevant, right, is finding the frame. And exploring, and then the realization, right, part of it
Yeah.
is moving back to like actualizing or realizing something. And he uses
Oh,
realizing in
okay.
two sense. He actually uses realizing in two senses, which I like, is he's actually saying it's a making which is that which is potential real, but also sort of in the synthesis sense of like your of creation as well as realizing. I don't think I actually got that right.
It's like
But there's two senses
the
of
material
realization.
reality and the recognition of a realization.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's like,
Recognition. Yeah, that's better. Thank you.
yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
that's and that's so that's what he's describing there is this the theological virtues or this dynamic movement, or what you're identifying, I think, with your sort of bifurcation, at least on that level. And I think you're right that this pattern then repeats itself, like it repeats itself in the conversation we're having now, but it also like in internally, like we have the left and right brain, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right,
So
which
it's
has that
going
same.
on, it goes on within each of us.
Yes.
And then it scales up, right? So the transcendent level of what's happening in me is what's happening between us.
Yes.
That's
We have a
higher
corpus,
level.
we have a right brain and a left brain that are connected by a
Yeah.
corpus callosum, and they're like, and you could list the right brain is the
Right.
of the actually it inverts
Yeah.
because your
Yeah.
hand
It
says the right
does.
brain
Yeah.
is actually then the hopeful network, and the left
Yeah.
brain is
Faithful.
the faithful network, but and so it's the faith hope, and they're corrected by the corpus callosum, which is the charitable or loving connection between them, which allows the opponent processing and them to accept and integrate into their own judgment or evaluation of the world,
Yeah.
evaluation in the evaluation of the other, right?
Yeah. 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 And then this conversation that we have has a relationship to the previous conversations that you've had with people.
Yes.
And so
Absolutely.
so that scales up again. And then you have like your channel with my channel and other people's channel, and it scales up again. And so we have this, all of these scales, right? All going up and down, informing one another and transposing into
Mm-hmm.
each of their lower iterations. And that's all that there is.
Yeah. But I think that's all that there is. But then I think
Yeah.
the key part of this that people miss out, and I is that I think that there is, and like I call this theology, right? Is processes that aid the development of a discernment
Yeah.
of good and true and beautiful, are theological, right? Because you're actually bringing about into the world. But there are anti-theological processes which
Right.
disrupt, anti-theological systems as too, that are designed to disrupt discernment,
Yeah.
right? And
They incite the hopeful error of
yeah,
excessive overlap, and they incite the faithful error of excessive differentiation.
yeah, I think there's more to those errors of faithful error and hopeful error. Like there's we can get into more nuance there about the different ones, and especially like it's because faithful error, I think it comes from the type, right? If it's good faith or bad faith really depends on the heuristic, and the heuristics can fail in two ways, right? They can either provide false positives.
That's a hopeful error.
Oh, well, is it a hopeful?
If you're over including,
You over including, yeah, it's a hopeful error. Um,
and if
and
you're
there's a
over
false
excluding,
negative,
yeah,
over
it's over
excluding.
excluding. Yeah.
Yeah, it's over excluding. Yeah, but those are still errors of faith. Like those are
Well,
still problems on the errors on the faith side. The hope
right,
errors,
right. They
it,
are both on the face side. I'm
yeah,
saying
yeah,
when the network as a whole fails,
yeah.
they're both failing in the same way.
Oh yeah, well, the network as a whole fails, but they can
Yeah.
fail there. But there's also things that can go wrong on the hope side, right?
Yeah, things can go wrong, and then it depends how
Yeah.
the other network responds and if it accepts the response.
Well, I don't want to break down the network here because there's the type side, errors, right? The type errors of, like I said, of false negatives and false positives. But then there's the hope side error where you are going off into the irrelevant in different ways, or yeah, so maybe missing the point of the system, right? Where you're including maybe being too expansive of the possibility space. But I think that on the hope side errors, I feel like those things like I was talking about, the cacophony or the false
Cacophony or equality?
yeah, like the equity problems
Equity.
of
Yeah, equity.
equity problems of the cacophony or false consensus, right? Where he actually, yeah. So it's sort of like the tolerance or intolerant, like they're like, and this is sort of in, invoking Mark from yesterday, but sort of like the tolerance intolerance errors possibly. I'm not entirely sure there. I think this is something I have to think about and explore more, but I think that there's definitely ways that things go wrong on that side and things that sort of ways that things go wrong with the typing. And it's
Yeah. And when things go wrong on one side, the other side has an opportunity to respond, right? Saying, "Oh, you're not
if
feeding me anything useful," and this is like,
yeah,
"Well, you have to just take it," or they can adapt and be like, "Oh, well, what
well,
would be
let's
useful?"
yeah, that's the
So,
charities. Like
yeah,
if you see if this corpus callosum is severed, if this
yeah.
charity breaks down networks, and this is something that like one of the ways that the systems are broken down. Like I think politically, what we see a lot, because I think that you see that polarity happen within governments or states where you end up with a right and a left. When we talk about the political right and the political left, is we're really talking about on the political level this emergent process of regulation through opponent processing emerging. But in order for it to work, is that there has to be charity between them. There has to be the charitable relationship. And what we see so much these days is things intentionally becoming adversarial and thrown into the work of basically jamming the process of discernment by jamming the principle of charity between the two sides, right?
Yeah, it's separating.
Yeah, separating them. They say, oh, this side is completely evil. Everything they say is evil. Not where where the better solution or the more accurate portrayal is that the line between good and evil goes through every human heart, and there's going to be not just good people on both sides, but there's going to be within those, there's going to be degrees of good people that you can actually work with and people you can't. And you need to actually find out who's actually in it for a process of discernment and who's in it trapped in one of these anti-theological models, right?
Yeah. And then to resolve that, there has to be some superordinate reference now. And that's
Yeah.
when you're talking about the referee coming in, right? And so there can be a
yeah.
bad, because the self-regulation is falling out, right? And so there's a structure within which those networks are embedded. And if they begin to not self-regulate, there's this idea there can be a negative imposition, right? There can be a toxic imposition of authority, right? But there can also be a beneficial imposition of authority where the referee actually does help the game get played and the players get to do what it is they want to do, right?
Yeah.
And so the superordinate reference, right? There has to be something higher than, if you're talking about the political polarization of a nation, there has to be something beyond the nation, right?
Yeah.
That can be referred to bring those sides back together. But if they don't see anything beyond, if they're stuck in idolatry, right? There's no transcendent value that they will accept.
Well, I think this is actually one of the problems with the material systems of external control, which you identified referees, but I see, but also they can be bureaucracies or these systems that are designed to create regulation. They can become self-serving, right? Or they actually it can be incentivized if they're earthly to actually sort of increase the discord or increase the opposition so that that increases their necessity.
Yeah, and they end up consuming what they're supposed to be feeding.
Yeah. And you see this in like within government all the time. They talk about I think they'll say corporate capture, or there's a pattern of like they're often the industries that are supposed to be regulating will capture the the
Mhm.
regulators, or
Yeah. So everyone on the regulatory board is also someone who's served on and will serve on a corporate board.
yeah,
So you have this.
yeah. So it actually, the systems break down that way, or conversely, they can become ideologically and just opposed to the industry they're supposed to be regulating, and that can
Mhm.
be just as damaging, right? Where it's like, well, you're not listening, you're not actually regulating the industry anymore, you're just trying to throttle or destroy the industry or the industrialization, right?
Yeah. So
Like
so when
the
you have an
cool,
adversarial regulator,
yeah,
right, and the only solution is in Christ.
yeah, absolutely, because it's but it's and the way that solution in Christ works is that you have to have people meeting in their name. And that's actually also in the um, Matthew 18:20. It's like 2 or 3 are gathered in my name. That in my name phrases, I think that's the part of that, is that we are agreeing that we're working into a process of discernment, that there is good, true, and beautiful that we're trying to discern. We're trying to find Christ's plan here. There's some, there's something that we're looking for that's not a mushy compromise. It's a truth that will be of value to both of us when it's revealed.
Yeah, it's a recalibration
Yeah.
of the opponent process
Yes.
in the pursuit of virtue.
Yeah. Which makes it different than the whole Marxist dialectic stuff and the postmodern stuff, where they talk about relative truth and relative beauty. And what they do is they actually use that idea, this thing that I think is accurate. You can't define truth, beauty, and the good, but that doesn't mean you can't discern them, right? It means that they're actually that they're so closely connected to the essence of who we are, that they're not definable by words. But because they'll come at you with the purely working in this propositional, which is something that also I think is a wound of the Enlightenment, is the emphasis on propositional knowledge, right? Of Vervaeke's 4 kinds of knowledge. The
Yeah.
propositional knowledge, since the Enlightenment, has become sort of superlative, or
Yeah, they become fundamentalists.
they're propositional knowledge fundamentalists. And I think that part of the reason they do that is because it's intrinsically synthetic, and it can manipulated to get away from discernment, right? Is you can make, if you can play language games, you can be word wizards, and then you can do these immoral things. You can jam discernment in ways that aren't obvious to people unless they're really paying attention. So you can preserve your bad faith, or you can preserve your false hopes that you're attached to by playing these word games and jamming the discernment, because the
Yeah.
discernment is bad for both sides of that, right?
Yeah. If you fabricate deceptive models and
Yes.
impose them onto people, then their lens of consciousness becomes warped so that they're no longer able to identify correctly. They lose the capacity if they're devoted to some defective model.
Yep. And I think that
And we,
it's, yeah. And what you actually see in Marxism is the propagation of this defective model that goes back to Hegel and Rousseau and Kant, right? This dialectical, like, synthesis, thesis, antithesis, synthesis model is always moving to the left, because it's always demanding you take a larger perspective, right? So the way the Marxist dialectic or Hegelian dialectic. I don't like that they use the word dialectic, because that forces me to use the word dialogos, because before dialectic meant what I mean when I say dialogos, but because of this it's the first word the Marxists took from us, or the Hegelians took from us. But what they call the Hegelian dialectic, they have this. So you have this thesis, or this thing that's in the world, and it's actually oppressive. It's oppressing this marginal system, which is the antithesis, right? And so you actually have to then sort of center or center the antithesis. But when you're doing that, like, you realize that the the antithesis is as valuable as the antithesis is valuable as a thesis. It might be better if I'm doing this with concrete examples, but that you have to take this sort of yin yang bigger example of it, saying, well, they're actually in this oppressive, it's a system that is repressive, and that you have to take a system level view, and that is essentially a synthetic view of the world, right? But when you do that, then it's sort of like, oh, well, I have the synthesis, I can find another, the synthesis can then be a thesis, and then be another, and there can be an antithesis thesis to that, and then I can do yet another synthesis and get an even larger perspective view. Now, remember what we were talking about the concentric and eccentric forces? We're moving in an eccentric abstraction direction. We're only moving in that one direction. And the idea that Hegel was saying is you're going to get to each of these ideas, you're getting a more perfect idea. And when you get the idea that encapsulates all the things, then you'll have the perspective of God, and you'll have the realization of God. You'll have the perfect idea that will be the idea that encapsulates all the ideas. But that is, that's going back to 1 Corinthians 13. You're basically just creating a recipe for, if I have verse 2, the unrestrained hope, and if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith as to remove mountains, but I do not have love, I am nothing. Right? It's and this is why it's fundamentally nihilistic, is that you end up denying being, because you're just trying to follow the eccentric forces into meaninglessness, and you're disconnecting there's no love in Marxism. There's no real love, because you're disconnecting. You're going into these layers of abstraction that are so hard that you have no connection to the authentic anymore.
Yeah, I think there's a unreliable assumption built into that, right? Which is the attainment of a complete synthesis.
Yes.
And that has to do with what I was saying when we began, like at the beginning of our discussion, which is that while we're in reality, the highest that we can go is to the level of some thesis and its antithesis.
Yeah.
Right. Because if we want to transcend that ultimately, that dichotomy, and find the total unity, then we're looking for something beyond creation.
Yeah.
And the assumption that a man can hold that is built into that Marxist project.
Yeah. And just to cover, is that you're breaking the process of discernment, because it's the relationship. You're making the relationship adversarial, right? You're saying, exactly. This is like these things. This system is broken, and that's a judgment on God, right? As opposed to saying, no, this is actually a process, a relationship that needs to be regulated. That's actually going to be productive, right? Which is the actual view, and what I connect to the Trinity and connect to this opponent processing thing. Is the correct view, the correct process of discernment. But we're talking about what's created by the buy-in, what creates buy-in in the Marxist project is that it looks similar enough to that the Marxists, that Hegel can send a convincing story, right? Because he says, because he's drawing attention to the same thing we're drawing attention to, is like, oh, look, there's these theses and antitheses, and you can see them fractally throughout the world.
And then it goes from the dialogos, it goes into a competition, it becomes adversarial.
Competition, it becomes adversarial, so nothing's being resolved anymore. It's the system.
Because there's a conflict, one side should win, right? And then that assumption breaks the love.
But it also, that assumption breaks the love, but it also breaks the love by the assumption of layering, and say, oh, we have to take this larger system view. That's the move we have to make. And we have to take this more and more abstract view. And so we have to have these technocrats, or these external regulators that have these extremely abstract views of things, or these perspectives. And that creates layers that also block charity, right?
The higher the ascension of agency, right? The broader the base that supports it. So as the
Yeah.
beast exalts itself, it
Yeah.
gains more people to consume.
Yeah. But it becomes like a Tower of Babel that will, that'll fall down and collapse because, people will stop speaking the same language, like to draw other biblical examples. But it's because of this, because the processes aren't self-regulating. If you're drawing everything in and trying to say, no, this large hierarchy, this layers of abstraction, these have to be layers of external control.
Yeah,
You
it's
can't
a
trust
it's
the
a
people to regulate themselves.
there's a
It's a house
there's
of cards.
a totalizing dynamic of control, right?
Yeah.
Because when you have the two sides and you pick one, right, then this side has to kill the other side, and then
Yeah.
then there's only one side. And so it's like you have any paradox and you say, no, one of the things is true and the other is
Yeah.
not true. And then you pin it to the board. And then you have a definition and you have an easy answer, right? But what you don't have is reality. And so when you observe all the tension that's still there, and the other side is actually still there because you can't cut it off in reality, only in your model. You try to impose your model on reality, you have all of this cutting off that happens. You're constantly cutting off, and they're like, okay, well, we got rid of those people, but now these people are representing that side of the dynamic. We need to cut them off. And now these people are representing that side of the dynamic. We need to cut them off. And so they're trying to stick this thing to the board, but in sticking it to the board, you do not have idealized life, you have death. Right? Because there's no more relationship anymore. Everything is gone.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think there's actually, we're actually sort of, I think we might have been talking past each other a little bit because we were talking two ways and two things that two ways the anti-theologies jam up the system, right? There's the way you're talking about is like by choosing a victor in that sort of thesis, antithesis, and backing up and declaring this is the good side that needs to be dominant and centered.
Yeah, workers of the world.
Workers of the world unite and center, like center the marginalized. They often will talk about centering the marginalized. So there's that.
Yeah, putting the bottom on the top. So you have the
bottom of the
wide
top
thing where the narrow thing should be.
Yeah, and it creates that kind of collapse. That's one way they block this. They disrupt the system. The other one is that I was sort of getting at is with the external regulations. They create these false priest classes, right? That they actually say, okay, well, we understand that there is this there's this relationship of thesis and antithesis that's creating a synthesis. So we have the true consciousness of that. So only we are in a position to regulate that relationship, and we have to make all the decisions about the regulation of that relationship. We can't, and this is, you see this about like with HR departments doing the equity stuff, right? It's like, well, we're seeing as like, we see the discrimination or whatever, because we have so we have to implement our quota system that's not a quota system, and these systems of external regulation, because only we have the true consciousness to see what's going on, because we're part of this priestly class. And then they play that hierarchy game, but there's really no love there, and there's because they've severed the love right away. And then what's the only thing that's determining the relationship, or they believe, is their mind's view, which they've put themselves in the place of God, right? They've blocked the possibility of true discernment.
Yeah, and I think both of those processes happen simultaneously.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah,
and it's those are both totalizing dynamics.
Yep.
So that's the totalitarianism. That's the because they're saying this thing is all things.
Yeah, and it's
total.
And it's but once the discernment process is blocked, and the bad faith and the false hope aren't being eliminated, they start to basically metastasize, and all the problems start emerging in the system, and you have all these different kinds of corruption. No, this has been a really good conversation. I think we're a little over time now. I think I have to get back to my kids. You need to get back to your kids, and we have to, this is sponsored by wives who will take care of the kids while dads are recording.
It is
sponsored tonight.
Very thankful for my wife. She's the reason I went to the conference. Yeah, I
Yeah,
told her
without
about it, and she said you have to go to that. So
awesome, super
yeah,
supportive.
yeah, yeah.
Well, is there anything you want to say to wrap it up?
Um, I think it's cool. I'm glad that we got to talk because I had I had some ideas like about the system failure that I wanted to offer and
Hmm.
see what you thought of it. And I feel like I could have expressed that more clearly, maybe, but it was good. And I also wanted to hear more about the anti-theology
Yeah.
aspect of it. So I was glad that we got to cover that at the end. And yeah, I was pretty nervous at the beginning.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Yeah, it's
You've done a
understandable.
few, but this
Yeah,
is my first
we're
time
sitting.
doing something like this. So
Yeah, the anti-theology stuff is like it's sort of like how I'm working in the work of James Lindsay a lot. So if you want to get into
oh yeah, yeah.
his stuff, because he's really
Okay.
studying Marxism in depth, and it's sort of
Yeah.
like seeing the comparison between what Vervaeke and Pajot were working on and what James Lindsay is working on was sort of like, oh yeah, so there I think actually see they think there is a theology and an anti-theology, and there's things that aid discernment and there's things that disrupt discernment, right?
Mhm.
And there is a need from an economic a spiritual economic perspective, right? There is a need for both. I like to talk about it as there's a there spiritual warfare is always ongoing, and there's an arms race going on, and there's an arms
Mhm.
race on the theological side, the God seeking side, for us to find new tools to help us get closer to Christ, and but there's also an arms race to find new tools to separate us from Christ, right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And I also, it's cool to be able to talk because like we both believe, in salvation through Christ and
Mhm.
in sanctification and redemption, whatever things. But we also have a lot of differences, right? And the way that you use some words is different than how I would use them. And I don't know if it's interesting to explore those things as well, but I'm glad that we avoided semantic arguments and
Yeah, it was the
conflicts about words like that. So
there was dialogos and some opponent processing that went on,
yeah,
right, exactly. Like, so we have the two different networks, and we approached it in a way where it's like, okay, we have these disagreements, but let's see if we can actually discern some truth, beauty, and good.
yeah. And I think overall, I like your project. I think it's really cool what you're doing, and I'd like to do
Thank you.
something similar too. And I know that we both talked with Matt, and Matt, I like Matt. He said just to join the conversation, right?
Yeah.
And just to create more opportunities for discernment, like what you're saying. I think it's a good thing to do, and I hope you keep doing it. So
All right. Well, with that, I'm gonna end with the way I always do. Residuum revertetur, viva Cristo Rey.